Great. Well, can you go on to one of my channels like YouTube and make sure you can hear me? You should be able to write in the comments. Well, everyone, sorry about that. I'm still getting used to this whole system, this new Restream system, and trying to make sure that it can be heard on multiple different podcasts. So I'm Carrie Bartholomew. I run the podcast Be Not Afraid. It's very small, and I usually interview other people, but I decided that today I would tell you my story because it's pertinent to the fact that the Trump administration recently, yesterday, put forth the initiative of the Foster the Future. Now, this is huge. For me, this is a lifelong dream to watch some of this come about. And some of it came about in his first round with Ben Carson as the head of HUD. And what that program was doing, from what I understand, and I don't have the exact information in front of me. Thank you. What that program was doing was, just let me open up the chat. What that program was doing was allowing people who aged out of foster care to have a fighting chance. That means they were given multiple different kinds of programs, and then those programs, they were expected to pay something back. The thing that they were supposed to pay back was about 10%, whether that was mental health care, whether that was insurance, whether that was classes like cooking or education. They were expected to pay 10% back. Now, there are people who are going to feel like that's not fair. How come this group of people gets a certain advantage, right? And that is where I want to go with this. I want to talk to you about the true disadvantages of those who age out of care. Now, aging out of care is different than being adopted. Aging out of care means that you are 18 years old or that you are graduating high school, whichever one comes later. And when you graduate, you are given now a suitcase. It's kind of weird the way they do this because there's these there's these nonprofits that charge way too much for suitcases when common sense people could just donate their suitcases and then you wouldn't have to leave with a garbage bag, which is what I left with. I was able to leave with 2 garbage bags when I got out of the foster system, and I had a plan which put me in a much better circumstance than a lot of other people. Sorry about that. Again, getting used to this program. So I'm just going to pull up my notes here and tell you a little bit about my story. The main thing is that I I'm different in my situation because I put myself in foster care when I was 8 years old. And the reason I did that is because there's something called the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Effects of Trauma Scale, and I'm a 9 on that scale, which means that many really kind of terrible things have happened in my life. Um, every kind of abuse that you can imagine. And the only thing on the original scale that hadn't happened until a couple of months ago. Okay. The only thing that hadn't happened before a couple of months ago was the fact that I hadn't had anyone die in front of me. And then, as you know, I was I was there when Charlie Kirk was killed. All right. So let's move into my early life and how that all played a part. So I guess we'd have to start with talking about my mother because every person who comes into foster child comes because of some deficit in parenting. And so I was a bastard child. I did not know my father. I have an idea of who he is, but I've never met him that I can recall. And my mother, um, perhaps was bipolar. I mean, today we're so inclined to give people all sorts of different diagnoses. So perhaps that's the situation. but she was cruel. That would be an understatement. And you can hear a lot of my story in Adam Coleman's book, The Children That We Left Behind. I did mean to read that, but my shelf fell down, and so I can't find the book, so I'm sorry about that. So, my mother went through different kinds of depression. I'm sure that she had an abusive life herself, and from a very, very early age, she resented me. I think that she was relatively a good mom until I was about 4 years old. But I really that's just me trying to remember. But she called me slave girl, and she made me call her your majesty. I'm biracial. My mother is white. My father obviously is black, probably from the Caribbean, not really important. So my mother had a very twisted sense of humor. My name is Carob, which means imitation chocolate. Everyone calls me Carrie. That's what I'm known as today. But my name is Carob. Um, and she beat me pretty mercilessly. Um, like I said, it seems like she was relatively good until a certain age when she got involved in drugs and swinging. When she got involved in drugs and swinging, everything went downhill. She met a man who was a drug dealer. She had an affair with him. After that affair ended, it ended because she met his son. So when she met his son, she started dating him, eventually got married to him in prison. Um, and sadly, he was more interested in me than he was in my mother. And so this very long, painful process of my mother resenting that. I think that she understood that at some level. He had not done anything to me at this time, but when my mom was before she met him, she was involved with someone else, and she thought that that person would make a good father figure, and she had decided that she was going to take her own life. And so she sent me on a trip with him, a camping trip for a weekend, and that was the last time that I was innocent. So I was 5 years old. As you can see, this is a picture of me behind, and what I say about that picture is that was the last time that I was innocent because that man was more interested in me for other reasons. And so he, even though I was tiny, a little tiny girl, he got a yellow baby doll nightgown, and that's what I was in for 3 days. And I didn't say anything because he said that he would, the typical things, kill me, kill my mom. And I went home, and then it wasn't much longer before my mother got involved with the father. His name was Jack, and then got involved with the son. His name was Donald. And it's kind of weird because even though my mother was a very cruel human being, the welfare system offered for people to go back to school. And my mother decided that she was going to go back to school to be a preschool teacher. So while she went to preschool, where she went to school in the evenings for preschool, Donald took care of me. Still nothing. But one time I told him that I'd been abused. And when I told him that I'd been abused, he said, "Oh, well, we wouldn't want to tell anyone because that would hurt your mom's feelings." Now, of course, as an adult, I know that this was not a safe person. But as a child, I totally trusted this person. I looked up to this person. I thought this person would make a great father figure. And obviously he wouldn't. So I think that once he knew that that had already happened to me, he thought that I was fair game. And I will tell you, I'm very much a person of faith. I don't care if you are or you aren't. I'm not a very preachy person. That is what drives me. And I think that God, quite frankly, saved me because once I went upstairs and he was laying outside or not laying outside, laying on the bed, and he said, "Come and give daddy a hug." And he removed his towel and he said to kiss him there, and I didn't. And I went in my room and I pushed my little dollhouse up against the door and I slept that way. And within a week, he went to rob a gas station. He robbed the gas station. He um, immediately went to jail and then to prison. And I was saved from that. But then I had to go to the prison. We lived in Washington State. And so I'd have to go to McNeil Island to the prison. And so I met a lot of people, a lot of kind, relatively cool people who also happened to be on death row. So that was my upbringing. And one day my mom decided that she wanted to teach me more about sexual things. Again, I'm very, very young, under the age of 8. And so she brought home a bunch of donuts and she wanted to teach me how to perform certain acts with donuts. And I knew that was wrong. I can't tell you why I knew that it was wrong, but I knew that it was wrong. And my mother was kind of like a hoarder. She didn't like to do chores. I had to do chores. She really liked to shame me. So she expected me to be absolutely perfect. And if I wasn't perfect, she would take me outside and she would hose me down in our apartment complex in front of everybody. Everyone could see what she was doing. Um, and so I experienced shame at a really early level. And by perfect, and I'm sorry, this is gonna get a little bit gross and vulgar and raw, but by perfect, I'm, under 7 years old. If you have dirty underwear, which oftentimes happens with little kids, my mother would pin them to the outside of my clothes and send me. Sorry, my dogs are acting awesome. She'd send me to school that way, and when she'd send me to school that way, um, nobody would do anything. The teachers didn't do anything about this. And so I would sit in the back behind where they used to have all of the coats. You didn't put them outside of the classroom, you put them on a wall. And so I would sit there. And when I would sit there, I would escape. The teachers oftentimes would teach through stories. And so I would listen to these stories and I would escape and I would think, I wish that were my life, especially The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So I remember being in that situation. And then finally, after 3 years of teachers not doing anything, I had a teacher who did. I had a teacher who thought something is wrong here. And she had me meet with a counselor. A counselor came to school and talked to me, um and that counselor would be in my life for the rest of my life. But first, I had to go home. And one time I would not go to school. I couldn't because my mom wanted me to do a drug deal and I knew drugs were bad and she wanted me to carry the drugs with her and I wouldn't go to school and the principal stood outside and called me swear words and I stood across the street at the church and I just knew that if I did anything, I would be in trouble. So I would go home and by this time I had a half brother, a baby brother, and every single time he would get in trouble, my mom would spank me. So, like, if and I mean, like, if he had a dirty diaper because I was at school, I would get a spanking when I came home, and she'd grab a cable cord, and she would just beat me with that cable cord. Um, and one time, she beat me with the cable cord so hard that it flew out of her hands, and it flew away, and when it flew away, I grabbed my jeans, I pulled them up, and I ran as fast and as hard as I could several blocks to a friend's house, and they hid me in the basement, and I thought, "They're gonna adopt me. I'm gonna live with this family, and it's gonna be a beautiful experience for the rest of my life," but the woman had cancer, and that's not what happened. So, that night, they came back, and they brought me home. The police came and talked, and then they took me home to my mom, And she was like, "Oh, my precious baby, I don't know why. Oh, she's making this up." And then they left and they grabbed it and she grabbed a pair of pliers and she held them next to my mouth, really close to my mouth. And she said, "If you ever bring the pigs to my house again, I will rip your tongue out." So I knew at this very young age that I I was not safe. So the next time I ran away directly to the police station. Mind you, I'm barely 8 years old. So I ran away to the police station and they were interested in the case because my mother was a drug dealer, a pretty prominent drug dealer. And so they were interested in the case for that reason. And she ended up going to jail and I ended up going into the foster system. And I would live in 18 foster homes over the next 9 years, moving. Back then, they didn't want you to get attached. So you would move very often. So, and then also, if I had a horrible home, I would tell my social worker, get me out of here. Um, I wasn't a particularly bad kid, but I was broken, as so many of these young people are. And I very much wanted to be adopted, but that was not my plight. Um, and at the risk of haters saying what they're going to say, it was not today where people adopt little mixed girls because they're purse babies. It wasn't like that back then. It was my mother had a very strong say, and even though she was a white woman, she did not want me adopted by a white family. Probably because some pre woke person told her that. So I lived in multiple homes. It was hard. I'll explain more of that to you in a moment. Um, and when I was 19, I aged out. So let's go into why I want to talk about this today. I want to acknowledge first that President Trump and his wife Melania put forth an initiative to change the outcomes to what's called Foster the Future. And I think that's really great if it's done well. I am cautious about some of the things that could happen in this process. But I think there's a strong chance that it could be done well. All right. Let me see. The conversation matters right now because for the last 4 years, and really longer than that, woke ideology has been prioritized in placing kids. And I would say that's not the best for most kids. Um, Most kids desire stability, and a lot of times in a progressive, woke household, a lot of times there isn't emotional stability because there's a lot of personal narcissism going on, and people might not like what I'm going to say here because I'm very straightforward. I just don't think we have time not to be, and I don't really see a point in not being. Obviously, I'm marched to the beat of my own drum. I always have. So I'm going to be very direct in the things that I'm saying. And as I said before, if you want to know more of the gritty details or you want to hear some really profound thoughts on what it is to grow up in an abused home and to grow up really forgotten. That's what I call foster care. When you aren't adopted, you were part of the forgotten people. You're part of the forgotten generation. I mean, yeah, I guess I could say generation, but it's many generations. Now, I have another channel that I haven't done anything on in years, but that has interviews from about 40 people who've aged out of foster care. The channel is called Age Out Rise Up. You are welcome to go and to listen to those stories, especially if you are a foster child. These stories are for you. I wanted to capture the stories of people who have done something with your lives. Now, here's the thing. Stories like mine are not supposed to be amplified. Um, you will find people, you'll find those movies of the week of people who say started pizza company, right? Or win the Olympics. But you won't find the story of people reaching normal, which for us is a success. So in my background, um, next week or in 2 weeks, I'll be celebrating my 20th wedding anniversary. I'm a normal mom. I do run a national organization. I run the state level of a national organization, but I'm a mom. That is my accomplishment. I don't carry a bunch of degrees. I just I'm a parental rights advocate and I care very, very deeply about the things that I talk about. So what I say is I'm a significant nobody. So I told you a bit about my mom, and while you may want to hate her, I don't. I'm very grateful because in life you can be two things. You can be filled with grievance, which is what I'm cautious about with any program said to help foster kids, or you can have gratitude and you can let gratitude define you. And what I'm grateful for my mom for was that she taught me how to read because that ability to read elevated my life and elevated my thoughts. Um, and that's something that even a lot of biological kids don't get. So I'm very, very grateful that I have a love of literacy and that has changed the outcomes for me. So I experienced racism in my own home, and I'm always uh, conscious of saying anything about it because there are people who are going to say, "Oh, you're just a race baiter. You're just this kind of person," and I'm not. I believe in the value of the human spirit, but in my own home, like I said, my mother called me slave girl, and she made me refer to her as Your Majesty, and in foster homes, I had foster moms who would use the N-word. Um, Fostering is not it's a whole lot of everything you don't expect it to be. It's presented as this is beautiful, this is wonderful, you get to share your family. It's just the kindest, saintliest people, or the opposite. The most evil people become foster parents, the most greedy people become foster parents. And the truth tends to be somewhere in the middle. There are saints who are foster parents and there are evil people, but most people are trying to navigate a system that oftentimes does not work. These kids are broken, they need strong supports, and instead they're just throwing what I would say oftentimes is entitlements. So as I'm watching people get upset about the initiatives, you have to take with a grain of salt that some people are just going to hate absolutely anything that this administration does, right? So they're going to just despise the fact that, oh, we've got all of this. We just had a government shutdown and now you're going to give money to these programs. But these programs matter because these are the people who start off with literally nothing. And perhaps instead of giving them to people who are coming here, we should equip the people who are already here with the tools to reverse the narratives, to change their lives. That is something that I think that people often are well intentioned about, but really have no understanding of. So I'm really appreciative when groups reach out and say, "Hey, we'd love your insight on this because you grew up this way and you get it." But there's a lot of people, and in my family, we did put our hand out and try to be foster parents. We did try to do this, and we found the system to be virtually impossible to work with and extremely unfavorable to our values. Um, and honestly, to the fact that I am a tough but loving person. And so we weren't supposed to ever do that. So I learned things like about restorative justice and how it's not really that. How there's no accountability. And when there's no accountability, of course, the same systems, because the thing is that the kids are reaching out and they're saying, hey, I've never had boundaries. I'm going to test everything. And if you can't say, all right, the boundary's crossed, if you cannot say that to a child, they're never going to feel safe. And so you have that for these little kids, but as you're moving forward to teenagers and to people who are about to age out, they've never had boundaries. Of course, there is a foster care to prison pipeline. And it's something that could be reversed so early with words like no, with objectives like hard work, with incentives, with people saying, I know that you are capable of doing hard things, not, oh, they've been too traumatized, so we shouldn't do anything. We should never try to work with them. So for me, what helped in my crazy life and moving and moving and moving was I had the stability of one counselor. His name was Paul Martin, and I will never forget him. I'm sure that he's dead now or else very old. Um, But Paul Martin went with me as I went to every single foster home, and his was a faith-based, I'm not Catholic, but it was Catholic Family Services. So his was a faith-based company, but he was the one constant in my life as I would move every couple of months to a new school. I went to every single school in the small town that I'm from in Moses Lake. So I went to every single school, just being moved. And sometimes, people could call you and say, I just don't want this person. And you'd think things were fine. And you would get home in the evening and you'd be moved to another home. Um, Sometimes people, they didn't want a black girl. That happens sometimes. It also happened that I was in a black home where I realized that, oh, yes, my friends, racism can go in any direction. Because I heard the most vitriolic, disgusting things on a regular basis in the time that I was there. So there's so many ways that fostering can go wrong. And I think it's important that we're cautious of those. I think it's really important that the administration is cautious of those. The other thing that becomes, even with religious organizations, is that there's a lot of progressive religious organizations that are going to push social justice, again, that are going to tell that child that you are a victim. Poor you, you've been traumatized. It's okay if you never do anything with your life. We couldn't expect that from you because you've been traumatized, which is, in my opinion, the most damaging thing that you could do to a soul, to a human being. To not come along and to say, oh, yep, you've had it hard. It, wow, I've never heard of the things that you've been through. And your past doesn't have to determine your future. You get to choose. When I was in 5th grade, I had a girl who swore at me and yelled on the playground that my mom was a coke addict, and she called me the N-word, and I jumped over a table and I began to pull her hair as much, like, in gobs out, and it took multiple teachers to pull me away from this girl. I Every pent up emotion, I lived in a horrible foster home, all of the terrible things I took out on this girl. I wasn't a puncher, I was a puller out of hair and a screamer, and people started calling me Scary Carrie. And the next year, I heard that the teachers drew lots. So this was the first time I'd ever heard of that, but they drew lots to see who was going to get the short end of the stick, and that person would be my teacher the next year. So I went to school with it still that reputation, Scary Carrie, as I walked into the class, and people didn't really want to be my friend. And within a couple of weeks, my teacher, Mr. Garza, pulled me out of class and he said, "Look, I see all the potential in the world in you. all the potential in the world, but you have to make the choice to harness it. Who you become, even though your life sucks right now, and it's going to for another, I'm sixth grade, so it's going to for another 6 years. You get to decide who you want to be in the end. And just the idea that I could have some choice about my life, it was like it instantly changed me. I instantly began to look for the people who had it worse. And there were people who had it worse because, yes, I grew up in the foster system and yes, I was poor, but people people get called names and treated badly for other reasons, right? And they're things that they can't fix. Well, you can fix whether or not you come across as poor. Maybe you invest a little bit more time when you're going through the thrift store and you look at the labels and you go, "Oh, that's Guess, that's bum equipment." And you choose those clothes instead of, you know, spending your $100 voucher at Kmart. There are things that you can do to improve your life that some people could not do because maybe they were obese or maybe they were unattractive or whatever else. And so I started to look for those people and tried to make those people feel good about themselves. And it was something that I could do in that moment that while I could make other people feel good, it made me feel good too. It made me feel like I had purpose because, again, when you are invisible, you don't have purpose. So for me, let me go back to the things that saved me. So Mr. Garza saved me. Um, for sure, my counselor, Paul Martin, and my love of books. Now, there are a lot of people who want to put the worst books in front of kids and say that if you are not mirroring their experience, they don't see themselves. And if they don't see themselves, they're going to end their lives. This is statistically untrue. This is a woke narrative to keep somebody focused solely on the fact that they're victims. So for me, books that changed my life, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking about Christmas, the books that changed my life were the classics, were Secret Garden and Sleeping Beauty and um, The Little Princess. Books about girls who went through something hard and transformed and became something beautiful. It was really that simple. And there were people who would talk, and when they would talk, I would hear their kind of um their comments, and I'm sorry, there are people who've told their stories. One was a man named President Uchtdorf, and he talked about the beauty of fairy tales. Now, there's a lot of people who think that, ooh, if girls like fairy tales, they're going to be trad wives, and we want to keep that away from them. But to me, the symbolism in fairy tales are what gave me hope. They were at least a part of what gave me hope. I also have my Christian leanings, but as a kid, reading books about something so far away from where I was, but still finding that common thread is what gave me hope to keep going. It gave me hope to be a kinder and gentler person than the little person inside who was broken and raged. Now there are programs like the Woodson Institute, where he specifically looks for mentors, being people who've already lived in hard circumstances, those people to help the people who are in those circumstances. And they are best equipped because they've been there. The hero complex, the let me save you complex, when you don't know, can actually do a lot of harm. I had a foster brother and he had a twin sister. For whatever reason, he was part of the regular foster system and she was part of a foster system that gave the kids a lot of stuff. This person, the sister, The brother became very resentful of the sister. I don't think they've ever talked. And when we lived in the same house, we were like 12 and 13. But I don't think they've ever talked since then. He became resentful, he's crippled, he's done nothing with his life. He's a statistic. She became entitled and has done nothing with her life. She's a statistic because buying buying wellness doesn't work. When we fostered, we had a young girl who was out of control, and she had some pretty extreme behaviors. It was enough to make us quit at eventually. Um, and anytime we would say we need help, they would say, "Let's give her horseback riding lessons. Let's do this thing. Let's whatever we can to make life better." Without ever dealing with the root problem, without ever saying, because what I would believe is that, hey, horseback riding lessons sound great if you earn it. If you've done some good things and you've accomplished certain things, then yes, you can get to the point where you can go horseback riding. But we don't just give it to you first and say, whatever you do, you just need time to cool off in a cool way. That's not a life lesson. And these people who say that it's best practices are breaking these kids. So I really want to caution this administration with all of its funding and what it's going to do. I'm aware of an organization that's going to do really great things. They are planning on having a school, and that school is high level expectations for these kids. High level merit based education, because a high level merit based education is what gives kids a fighting chance. It's what gives them a seat at the table. And I know this because I have been so blessed to be able to send my son and to work for a charter school, so a free school, even a part of a public school, the public school system, in something that is competitive with the best private schools. So the solutions have been there, but there's been a block against them. There've been blocks by groups like GLSEN who've said, "Hey, if you're not going to support our agenda, we're not going to place kids with you." And part of the reason one of our young foster kids was broken is because she did not want to be in an alternative lifestyle home, and nobody cared. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be alternative lifestyle homes. I'm saying that if a child is in a place where that's what they want, that's one thing. But if a child is saying, this doesn't feel right to me, then a political agenda shouldn't be the top, shouldn't be the thing that's making it happen. And that is what has been happening during the entire Biden administration. That and activism, using these kids. Oh my gosh. In Canada, the highest group, and I believe it's also in America, but it's something I would have to check. The highest group of people transitioning are people who don't have parents. They are the forgotten, they are the invisible. And they are the group that's being experimented on. And in some cases, genocided. You know, these activists will say this is a genocide and that's a genocide. What's a genocide? Is taking kids and making them barren who've never had parents to stand up for them in the first place. So we can talk about work initiatives. There's a pretty strong number of people who I'm trying to see if I've got that exact number. The reality of the people who, okay, 20 to 25% of those people who age out of foster system currently become instantly homeless. 20 to 25% become homeless. They don't have parents to say, "Hey, I haven't figured out what I wanna do with my life. I'm gonna stay home for a while." They don't have options. 50% face unemployment. Well, yeah, when you haven't been taught that actions have consequences or even that you have to work because see, the foster system can and often does create permanent dependence of the state. I'll tell you what happened when I was 18. I was sent to go to a school called Cornish College of the Arts. That was my plan. And immediately I was given my grant, my Pell Grant, and some scholarship money. And it was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. It was probably like $3,000, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I didn't know anything about how to deal with this. So I go to the bank and they said, "Do you want some cash out?" And I said, "Sure." And I started walking down the street, and every single, literally every single poor person I saw panhandling on Capitol Hill in Seattle, I gave like 20 bucks to as I'm walking down the street. And suddenly I'm down to like 25 bucks for the week. But it's okay because I have food stamps. Now, the food stamps they have, I wish they would bring back. Those were in a coupon book. They would take the coupon book. You'd have to go to the front of the store and you weren't supposed to tear them out beforehand because that meant you were probably doing something shady. You probably traded them for something. So you take your coupon book, you go to the front of the cash register and you open up the coupon book and you get exactly what you're allowed to get, which is nothing from the deli. It's nothing high end. This is you're poor, we're helping. This is what you've got. And I remember opening that up and looking around at the people and going, "Well, this is embarrassing. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life." And I looked out and I looked across the street. And when I looked across the street, what did I do? I saw Taco Bell on Broadway was hiring for the graveyard shift. And so I decided to go across the street and to get that job and not use my food stamps because I didn't like that feeling of shame. But I do think that feeling of shame is important to have. There has to be some incentive to make your life a little bit better. So the same thing happened with working a job and barely able to make it and having to borrow money from the payday places. And you borrow and you feel, okay, I can get through. And then the next time you have to pay and they eat more of your check and you have to do it again and you're on a cycle. And eventually you go, what can I do to get off of this cycle? And you learn life lessons. And the best way to learn those life lessons is to have somebody with you who's been there themselves and who's come out the other side, not somebody who is a woke social worker who wants to keep you there. That is my biggest concern. I work so hard to keep kids from turning into activists. And knowing that there are organizations that literally prey on the most vulnerable to turn them into activists is something that I find really hard to accept. And I'm so hopeful that we're putting the right people now in place to help them. 70% of young women become pregnant by the age of 21. Not only do they become pregnant, but many of them are sex trafficked or become prostitutes. Aging out of foster care is a hopeless experience. I know that there were times when I did not think I would get by, and I'm, a cute, skinny little 20-year-old. And a few times, now I never ever fell for this, but a few times I was propositioned. And even the idea that it stayed in my head that I was like, "Man, that would be easier than this. It would be so much easier than 2 jobs and going to school." That's why there's got to be some relief. And what I feel about food stamps is that it shouldn't be this cutoff, this hard, fast cutoff. It should be a stepping stone. So I had this horrible job where I went to a temp agency and I needed to work. And so I got up super early in the morning. I got up at 3 in the morning and went on a van out to some factory and I stuffed luggage and people would yell at me not in English. And if I kept that job, I could still keep welfare. But then the temp agency said, "Why are you working this job? You are poised, you are eloquent. Why don't you become a receptionist?" So then I moved into a receptionist job, and that receptionist job was about 25 cents more than food stamps allowed. So I had to make that choice. And I just had to cut it off, and it was a hard choice, and it shouldn't be that hard because what we're doing is ideally we're giving our youth, we're giving our most vulnerable a chance to fly. And you're taking people who barely learned how to breathe because every nothing is certain in their lives. And you're finally giving them this chance to fly, but you're clipping them and saying, if you fly, we're going to punish you. Because that's what happens when you are a dependent on anyone, when you're a dependent on the government, especially. The government enslaves you. And the sad thing is that there's so many groups out there, former foster children this and foster blah blah blah, and all of them are young people and sometimes people my age and older saying, "I want more, give me more. I want to take. I deserve," when all it is slavery. You don't believe that you can do something for yourself because you've been taught it over and over and over again. Every single time you've thought people are kind, you've been taught that you can't, that it's impossible for you to achieve. And it's just not true. So, yesterday, when I flipped through and looked through social media and I saw this, and I thought, wow, this is a moment. Now, I don't believe this moment's going to last. And the reason it's not going to last is because the same people who this would help have been taught to hate the hand that is feeding them. They're going to start saying, it's not enough. I want more. I've already seen it's only this much money per person. And so instead of taking that gratitude and going, I have this opportunity. What can I do with it? People are going to spend their time protesting. People are going to spend their time saying, it's not enough, but it's more. This generation has a chance to not start off with a paper bag or with a plastic bag. They have a chance to not have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be able to keep a roof over their head or to not have to consider prostitution, male or female, because oh my goodness, is it real for the boys? I've interviewed several of the boys who've been through horrible things when they age out of care. Sometimes there's programs for girls and there just isn't for them. Incarceration rates are several times higher than non-foster peers. Only 3 to 6 earn a college degree. Now, please do not. I love that there's apprenticeships. I love that it's entry level too. Nobody's just going to give you a seat in the nicest office with windows. You got to start at the beginning. You got to start in the mailroom. And that is so good because then you get to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did that. I earned that. I earned every promotion. This is how we begin to build the self esteem that was not built in us when we were growing up. This is how we begin to have true resilience so that when people, and they will be, trust me, when people decide to be cruel and um, to beat you down, you go, you have no idea. You have no idea where I've come from. There are people who regularly uh, like to rub in, you're insignificant. You're a nobody. What have you achieved? How big is your house? They judge. And they don't understand that normal is something to be proud of. What I see in this program is the potential for so many people to reach normal. And that's exceptional. Normal is what so many people want. But you're told that you can never ever be the millionaire or the billionaire, which isn't true. There are a lot of people who started off hard that have achieved that. But you're told that you can never be that, so don't even try. And if you don't ever try, then you can be a dependent forever. So I'm really hopeful that the system that's coming is going to be a system that is a starter system. I'm really hopeful that people will listen to this and they will go, "Oh, okay, I don't want to be a slave. I don't want to be a mental slave. This is a gift and I do not want to squander it." And I hope it has a time limit. I don't think that you should be 50 and still getting whatever um benefits because life was hard when you started out. Like to make someone like AOC cringe, you got to pull yourself up. You got to pull yourself up and make something out of your life. And I believe this is the whole make America great again. This is that movement. This is the movement where they're saying who needs the help? What Americans can we help? How can we change the narrative? How can we bring hope into the picture? And hope, my friends, is what will sustain you. You will go through dark times. When I was in college, I tried to take a bunch of pills and kill myself because I still didn't fit in. And I still don't fit in. So, but if you have hope and if you have faith in something higher than yourself, but also if you have faith in yourself, because you need both, you do. If you have those things, you can reach what I just say is happy. You can reach a place of being a genuinely happy and fulfilled person. And the fact that you could have even that opportunity is, I don't have another word for it. It's such a gift. Let me see. So I want you to be careful of certain things like social justice initiatives that often exploit foster kids. Ones like victimhood messaging, telling kids they cannot succeed, using them in political narratives rather than helping them. If you are in a program that just hands you something and doesn't teach you how to use the skills, and if they say, oh, the skills we're teaching you is how to be a community organizer, they're using you. You need skills that will work. You need skills like carpentry, skills like electrician. I would be very, very cautious of going to school to become a teacher. I'd be very, very cautious of taking the money to go to college today. There may be a few colleges, but having a child who's of college age, I would be so cautious of using that. There's a massive difference between a handout and a hand up. That really is fundamentally the difference. That in itself is why I'm a conservative. Not because I grew up with a silver spoon in my life, because as you've just listened to me for the last hour, you know that's not true. But it's because I believe in helping people up and building in them confidence that they can do for themselves. And accountability, that is your best friend. Find a mentor. If you're in Utah and you're aging out of the foster system, I will help you. Reach out. I cannot help you financially, but I will be there for you to talk to. I will be there. I would help you find programs that will teach you skills. I'll take you to church. um, Let me just tell you some of the things that happened under Ben Carson that nobody acknowledged. He focused on independence. He focused on financial literacy, on home ownership, on breaking generational poverty cycles and programs with measurable outcomes. This is huge. A social justice income or a social justice initiative oftentimes does not have a measurable outcome. It's just let's keep taking, 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 taking. You'll never feel good about that and you will become dependent on that. And that last thing is, I mean, as I said, I am a Christian. I was there when Charlie Kirk was killed. And these programs that have a religious outcome oftentimes focus on mentorship. They focus on structures. That means they focus on something that's already proven. They have high expectations. Someone will come along and help you if you're not getting them. They're not just going to make excuses for you. They have real love for you. They might not even know you, but they're doing it out of love for you. And they hold you accountable. Again, your best friend is accountability. Many of us who grow up in the chaos, we have issues with executive functioning. I'm one of them, even today. So you have accountability. You have somebody, or even if it's something that you put up on your phone, you have something that says, make sure I get X done. And you accomplish it. And you tell somebody, I want to accomplish this. And you put it on your wall on a poster and you say, I want to accomplish this. And then you can do something. The choices that you make, they're going to determine the kind of people who want to be around you. If you want success in your life, you have to surround yourself with people who already have the life that you want. And I'm not talking once again about like high incomes. I mean, if that's what you want, that's fine, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is people of character. Surround yourself with people of character and they will hold you to that same standard. And I think another thing to remember is that your trauma is never going away. It's not. But it can feel like more like a shadow, just something that's kind of in the background there, but it doesn't dictate. It does not have to drive you. People who think that your trauma has to drive you, they want to control you. If these programs, if these initiatives can get that, can get people to say, yes, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, and also I get to make choices in who I am, they'll succeed and you will succeed. So let me just wrap up here. The foster system did not save me. These initiatives won't save you. They are a tool for your toolbox. You save you. You save you by the choices that you make, but now you have just that ability to breathe if you take them. If you spend the next couple of years squandering them or saying it's not fair, I didn't get enough, whatever, if you do that, they will be gone. And the only programs that will be there will be ones that enslave you. Avoid programs that create permanent dependency and look for programs that give you skills to make you of purpose, to make you able to be a contributing member of society rather than just someone who takes. And remember that every tiny small accomplishment that you get, everything that you do, that adds to kind of your hope box. That adds to I am capable. I can do this. What's the next step? I was at a conference this weekend and I heard the words, do the next good thing. That's the same thing for you. Do the next good thing. Take those teeny tiny opportunities and every one that seems like just a small thing that somebody else is going to bypass, you take. You look around and you go, who, what, where, how, what opportunities are mine for the taking and how can I make the most of them? And if you really want to be happy, you give back. You serve every chance you can get, and it'll keep you balanced. And it'll keep that shadow, that story that you had to live through, that pain that you had to live through, it gives it purpose. It says, yep, I went through this big ball of gross so that I could become a person who can be something better and who can give something better and who can make the world better. And when you get to that point, I think you're healed. So I have to go and watch a show. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like what I've said, if you feel free to follow. If you're in Utah and you're of mom age or pre-mom age, I do run Moms for America in Utah, so reach out there. If you like what I'm saying and you want to hear more of these long form things, I'm at Carib Marcel, Be Not Afraid on YouTube, and I'm on both on Instagram. So yeah, I think it's a good day. I think it's a good initiative. And I'm really praying that those people who take advantage will have discernment. Be well, my friends.